The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everyone. I wanted to welcome everyone to tonight's webinar. This is Dr. Lome Lavine. Many of you know me as the Digital Dentist, and I wanted to welcome all of you to this evening's webinar. As of this morning, we had close to 200 people that were registered for the webinar, and a good number of people are already logged in here. Many of you have been on these previous webinars in the past, so the format's going to be very familiar to you. For those who have not been on these webinars before, on your screen you should all have a little GoToWebinar control panel. And the main reason for that panel, that's how you're going to be able to ask questions. Now, because I'm the only one presenting tonight, unlike other webinars where I'm moderating, I really won't be able to get to any of the questions until I'm done speaking. But go ahead and type in your questions as you think about them, and I'll certainly leave time at the end this evening in order to get to as many of those questions as we can. Tonight's webinar is going to be slightly different than some of the other ones we've done in the past. For starters, it's going to be a lot shorter. The concepts that I want to get across really aren't all that difficult, and I'm not sure if I really see a need to bash people over the head with it. I think they're fairly self-explanatory. The other thing is that I'm just coming off a really nice case of strep throat and conjunctivitis, so we're going to see how long my voice lasts for, but we should be out of here quite a bit earlier than we normally are. When you log out this evening, when the webinar is over, you're going to see a short two-question survey. Would you want me to follow up with you? Our sponsor tonight is MaxiDent. Do you want them to follow up with you? That's it. Those are the two questions. You don't have to say yes or no. You can just close out. But if you are interested in having either one of us follow up and answer any individual questions or consult with you, please let us know. Many of you also know that I do tend, and certainly tonight that's going to be the case, to record these webinars. We are recording tonight's webinar. So in case you can't stay towards the end or you get distracted, don't worry about it. That email should go out probably tomorrow, and it's going to have a link to the entire recorded webinar. You can review it at your convenience. For those of you who might be interested in getting AGD PACE, we don't typically are able to offer that at no cost, but I'll certainly send you information about that as well. As I said, my name is Lome Lavine. For those of you who don't know anything about me, I was a practicing periodontist for 10 years. What I've done over the past, wow, it's coming on 13 years now, is to work with practices and assist them with their technology decisions. Over the years, it's kind of evolved. At first, it was mostly computers and networking, and we still do a lot of that. But over the last number of years, it's focused more on services, backup and disaster recovery. Going chartless, going paperless has been really on everyone's forefront, and that ties in nicely with tonight's topic. Also, with a lot of the new HIPAA regulations, security and privacy, I've done a lot of research on that. I recently became certified as a certified HIPAA security professional. So, not that I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm certainly very current as much as you can be with these regulations. The other thing that I've done over the last 4 or 5 years is to present webinars. And as with tonight's topic, a lot of times they're in my area of expertise, which is technology. They've been clinical in nature. We've done ones on extractions and implants and ortho and a lot of great topics. Really, the goal of the webinars is to provide content that I think is interesting, and hopefully it stimulates you. As long as you get something out of it, if you got 1 or 2 little nuggets or pearls of information that were worthwhile to you, then obviously I think it makes it worth your time, and hopefully we're going to hit on those topics tonight. Many of you may also know that I have a regular blog where I try to post information that I think is of benefit to dental practices. If you go to my website, thedigital.dentist.com, the blog is actually right on the main page now. I have not missed a day of blogging since May of 2005, so we are coming up on 8 years without a missed day. You don't have to actually go to the blog, and you can kind of see there's a place to subscribe it. So rather than you going to the blog could come to you. It's free. We have about 700-800 people that get the blog every day, and we're more than happy to have anyone else that wants to receive it just sign up for it. Every few years, I also try to write a technology guide. The tech guide is really designed to rate all the different products out there: practice management software, intraoral cameras, digital x-ray systems, CAD/CAM, cone beams, all that stuff. We were supposed to do one last year. I decided I wanted to wait till this year, so keep your eyes peeled for that as well. So let's get into the meat of the presentation tonight. And many of you have been hearing about the significance. We are in 2014 now. We've actually been talking about the significance of 2014 for a number of years. Now, of course, according to the Mayans, we've all been dead for a couple of years, but that's really not the case. But I'm relating this to the need for chartless or paperless records. And what it is, and unfortunately it's not exactly very accurate what we're seeing out there, is that there tends to be a belief out there that there's a law that says that all patient records, medical and dental records, are supposed to be electronic by the end of 2014, this year. Now, there certainly was a mandate about that, and we'll talk about what incentives they've done to try to get it to that point. It is absolutely not a law. Most of us know that, especially when we're talking about dental applications, we really don't have much standardization. People using one practice management software can't talk to another practice management software, can't really talk to your image software. And in imaging, we have a format, the DICOM format, which is supposed to alleviate these problems, but just it's not a reality in dentistry. So the fact is the government is certainly going to encourage us to get chartless by the end of this year, and there are certainly some incentives which we'll talk about, but there's definitely no law. This was first proposed by the younger version of President Bush, the son, back in 2004. It's endorsed by the ADA, by Obama. The fact of the matter is, as I said, there's really no standardization. Every time we have elections, it seems to change the whole makeup of the government. So who's to say what's going to happen? The thing is, I could be wrong. And I think the more likely scenario is at some point the insurance companies are going to stop accepting film and paper claims. So I think that's a more likely scenario that's going to sort of nudge people along to a chartless or paperless environment. The thing is that if you're trying to get chartless or paperless, it's typically about, now of course I'm talking about existing practices. New practices have it easy because they can start from the get-go. But for existing practices, ideally if you can get it done in 12 to 18 months, consider yourself to be ahead of the curve. We've had practices that, honestly, if they did it in 12 to 18 years, I'd be shocked. We've had people do it quicker. You have to be pretty motivated to do that. But certainly, it is very doable. And if you don't believe me about this stuff, you can certainly go online. Just go to Google and put in 2014 and EHR or EMR or EDR, and you'll get a few gazillion hits. So the government said, well, what can we do to try to get people to move in this direction? We can certainly consider, giving them the carrot, not necessarily this carrot, but the one that you actually eat, or we can give them what we've done in the past, which is the stick. For once, the government has come to their senses and realized, well, let's work on the carrot this time. And many of you know this as the stimulus bill or the stimulus package. And there's a bunch of acronyms out there. The American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which is ARRA. Part of that act was the High-Tech Act, which covers not just some concepts as far as compensation, but certainly any of you who are current with HIPAA regulations, a lot of those come through high-tech, and the new omnibus rules are just an extension of those, so that's very prevalent in dentistry as well. There's CC-HIT, which is an organization that determines whether your software meets the criteria for being chartless or paperless. And what they basically said, and this is obviously directed, I know we got some people from Canada on tonight and things are different up there, but Up to $63,750 per office is available, and that started actually a few years ago. The problem in dentistry, as I see it, is that there are a few hurdles that you need to clear. Now, they also have a different plan this is through the Medicaid program. Through Medicare, there's a different program where you have potentially up to $44,000. You can't do one or the, you have to do one or the other. You can't do them both. As most of you know, Medicare doesn't cover most dental procedures, so most people in dentistry that are applying for this are going through Medicaid. However, there are, as I said, a few hurdles. First hurdle, you have to be 30% Medicaid with your patient population. If you're not at 30%, do not pass go, do not collect $200. You've not met those criteria. The second thing is what's called meaningful use criteria. You can't just have the software in your practice. You have to actually be using it in a way that they determine to be a meaningful way. And it's doable for dental practices, but a lot of times you're tracking things that a lot of dental practices wouldn't normally track. Patients' smoking habits, their body weights, things like that. You have to meet, there's two lists, a list of 15 core objectives where you have to use all 15, then another list of 10 where you get to choose 5 of those 10. So again, it's doable. We know some practices that have done it, but it's, with that 30% Medicaid, that eliminates a good chunk of most of the dental practices right off the top. And the final thing, as I said, you have to have certified software. Now, one of the gists, one of the goals for tonight's presentation is to talk about, well, if you're in the market for a new practice management software or don't really understand, why you're not getting the most use out of your existing practice management software, one of the questions, and I've been lecturing on this for years and years and years, ever since I started lecturing back in the year, I think it was 98, I've been talking about, well, how do you choose a practice management software program? It's important to understand that over the last number of years, the number of programs out there has actually decreased significantly. Gordon Christensen, back when it was called Clinical Research Associates, they did a survey in '99, 15 years ago. 208 different practice management programs were identified. Now, some people had quite a different view of practice management software than I do. Some people said Outlook was their program or Quicken, and obviously those are not what we would consider to be practice management programs. Right now, that number today, it might be 35 to 40. I would venture there is at least 4 or 5 out there that I've probably never heard of. I just heard about a new one today on Dentaltown. I would say there's probably a good 15 to 20 that most of you have never heard of. Most of you are probably familiar with some of the major players. One of my goals for tonight is to introduce you to one that's actually more of a minor player, but I think definitely on the upswing. And many of you know that throughout the years, I've championed these types of companies. When I first came into this business back in the early 2000s, I became very enamored with companies like Apteryx and XDR and DemandForce, and we can see how well these companies have done nowadays. And I think when I introduce you to Maxident and talk about some of their concepts, you'll see that they fit right into that mold of companies that I really think have a great product. They're not owned by a large dental supply company, so you've got one company, one focus, and I think that's really a good thing. Certainly that number has dropped a lot because of consolidation. There was PracticeWorks, which then became Kodak, which is now called CareStream. There's Shine. They bought out a number of those smaller systems as well. Right now in this country, there's 3 major players. There's Kodak, which is now called CareStream, which is SoftDent and PracticeWorks. There's EagleSoft and Dentrix. And those 3 account for about 70% of the market. Where my interest tends to lie is the other 30%, because as I said, I think there's some great programs out there that really can meet your needs. And just because it's not owned by a multi-billion-dollar company doesn't mean it's not a good product. We get asked a lot about Macs. I do believe there are a place for Macs in the dental practice as long as you understand that you've got some limitations, primarily when it comes to imaging, that there are a few programs, a few systems that will work natively with Mac, but normally to get the most use of it, you're going to have to run Windows either through Parallels or VMware or Boot Camp, and then of course at that point you're really, in my mind, kind of defeating the whole purpose of the Mac. Certainly some of the programs out there will run on Macs, but I am not a huge fan of Macs at this point. When I've been lecturing on this topic over the last number of years, What I've always said to people is that, listen, you've got to try to focus on the things that are most important to you when you're looking at your software. And normally I'll talk about things like scheduling. We'll look at insurance estimation, which obviously, it's an important thing, and billing and running monthly reports. And what I usually recommend to people is, well, take an imaginary new patient and run that patient through the practice to get a feel for the software. Does it somehow seem more intuitive to add a patient into one program than another? Is it easier to chart them and treatment plan them in this one program versus another? And I think that those are still important things. The problem is, in my experience working with practices all over North America, is that the typical dental practice is grossly underutilizing what their practice management software can do. By my estimation, and this is just an estimate, I don't have any hard numbers on this, the typical practice that I work in, the practices that I tend to work with are more towards the technologically savvy end of the scale. I mean, these are people who are already digital, they're trying to go chartless and paperless and get HIPAA compliant, so they're pretty on top of it. And most of them, I would say, are using maybe 5 to 10% of what their software can do. And I'm being generous. Most of them are using it like you see here on the screen, that they're more or less using it as a glorified accounting system. If there's any one concept that I want to get across this evening, is that you really need to start thinking of your software as a way of generating money, not as a way of counting it. And we're going to be talking, the invitations that we sent out were to introduce you to a new type of system. One thing that I want to make sure, many of you who have been on past webinars know that I've talked about Maxident before. Full disclosure here, I do not work for Maxident. I do not sell their software. I do not resell their software. I have no ownership stake in the company. I'd like to, but it hasn't been offered to me. Like all of my webinar sponsors, they pay for my time and for the cost of promoting the webinar, and that's basically it. The reason that I asked them to sponsor tonight's webinar is that I feel there are certain concepts and features that you really should be looking for in your software, and I believe that they've got that. So my goal for this evening, for the rest of the time we're talking, isn't for this to seem like an infomercial, because we're only talking about one product as an example of these concepts. But my thought is that if you're unhappy with the current software you're using, at the very least, give them a call, get a demo of the program, and decide for yourself if your existing software is still the best choice for your practice. What I wanted to show you is some of the concepts that I think are important and how Maxident does it, so that when you are evaluating your current program or deciding if it's time for a change, look for these types of concepts and say, well, if other programs are doing this, can my program do it? Now, many of you may not be aware of the fact that you have existing programs that probably can do some of this stuff, but you've never really looked into it. So that's obviously part of this process here. If you're trying to achieve a high income practice, which I would assume all of us are, there's really 3 areas that we want to talk about. We want to talk about what are the opportunities that you typically have in your practice for generating income, what are the challenges that you're facing, and what are the solutions. That's going to be the theme of what we're talking about for the next 15 or 20 minutes or so. The opportunities is basically income. And for most dental practices, we're looking at 3 specific streams of income. First off are the treatment plans. These are the ones created typically by the dentist. Most of you would be shocked. I think if you're using your software correctly and you actually had a way of going through your treatment plans to see uncompleted treatment in those treatment plans, it's shocking. I mean, in most cases, you would see easily a year, 2 years worth of your annual production that's uncompleted treatment, that's buried in those charts that you're just not aware of. Even if you're using software, and of course a lot of us are still using paper charts, and you just obviously have no way of really effectively getting that information. Second would be recalls, patient. I mean, for a lot of practices, the recall is really the backbone of their practice, and that is a good source of income, and that has to be monitored as well. And the final part is the insurance approvals, that people are getting approved for, they're getting pre-approvals, they're getting approved for benefits, but a lot of us just have no way of capitalizing on those approvals and making sure that we actually turn that into treatment. So those are the 3 areas that I think are really important as far as their ability to produce income for the practice. So let's look at each one of those. The treatment plan. Typically it is the dentist that creates that treatment plan. And the thing is that we're trying to create treatment plans that are going to make our time very efficient. You don't want to block off an hour or 2 hours for an occlusal amalgam when you could very easily be doing 4 or 5 restorations, but you just weren't aware, you forgot about it, or your software is not really helping you to realize that you've got multiple things that you can do during that time. So what you want to try to do is measure your potential income and then set a goal. And as I said, if you're using a good software system, you may have produced a certain amount per year, and say it's $400,000, but you go through the software and you realize, hey, I've got $400,000 or $500,000 here of uncompleted treatment that was just stuff treatment planned in the last 12 months, which is, that's potentially, a lot of money there that's being passed over. The thing is, can you use your software to find that uncompleted treatment easily and be able to turn that into production? And that's where, a good program like Maxident, I think, is really going to help you with that. The second thing would be patient recalls, and that's obviously typically going to the hygienist, because you want to be able to track your patient recalls. We all have this happen in our practices where patients fall through the cracks. Part of the challenge, I think, for a lot of practices is that they don't really have an automated system, that they're calling patients up, which is, ineffective at best, when there are so many automated systems built into it. Now, one of the nice things that Maxident does is it has this system built into their software. There are certainly third-party programs out there. Many of you know that I'm a fan of Demand Force, and there's the Lighthouses and Yappies and all these third-party programs. But if it's built into your practice management software and doesn't cost you a penny extra to use it, why not? That seems to be a better way of approaching it. The thing with recall patients is that it tends to be a very high volume, high traffic department. You want to keep those patients flowing through the practice. A lot of times the hygienist is finding treatment that needs to be done beyond the standard prophies that they're happening. So that's another great opportunity, is making sure you're on top of the recalls. The final opportunity, the third one that we talked about, are insurance approvals, and that's obviously through the office manager, the receptionist. If you're getting good income streams from the treatment plans and from the hygiene, it could still get stuck if you are pre-approving for insurance or benefits that that are available or are out there, and you're just not aware of it. So someone has to be managing the insurance effectively. Otherwise, you've done the other two things great, but you still get stuck at that one point. So what are the challenges that we're typically facing here? Right now, when it comes to treatment plan, as I said, most of us would just be shocked if you actually had a really good way of doing this, of finding how much unscheduled treatment is basically hidden in those charts. Do you know off the top of your head who needs a crown or an implant or a large restoration, high income producing procedures? How do you find them? If you're still using paper charts, the only way to do this, and I certainly did this back when I was in practice. Now, I started in '92, so there really wasn't I was using SoftDent back then, but I certainly wasn't very sophisticated. And we would have times, like once a month, we would sit down and do a chart audit where we'd actually, my staff and I would sit down and we'd go through each chart and see who was scheduled for treatment, and we'd make a little spreadsheet of, it was just unbelievably time-consuming, and it wasn't really all that effective. It would be nice if there's a way to track that and know about it, from the get-go. What about with insurance approvals? Certainly, a lot of people need to get pre-approved for that, but you would want to know that, don't you? Don't you want to know who's been pre-approved for the major treatment? Who has insurance that's about to expire in a treatment plan on file? Many of you, I certainly do this with my business to this day, with my IT business, is that we always send out, and usually in September or October, what we call a use it or lose it letter, which basically says, hey, you've got Schedule 179 deductions you can take advantage of, and this is a good time to do it, especially now, because last year it was $500,000 and this year it's $25,000. So you should know that. Not all insurances change on December 31st. Most of them do, but if certainly towards the end of the year, why not be able to figure out, okay, who's got benefits that are about to expire and has a treatment plan on file? I want to be able to track that information. What about whose insurance is just reset? Normally that's going to happen in early January for a lot of people. Well, that's a great time to start thinking, okay, well, all these people now have new benefits for the year. Let's use those up. Of course, how do we be able to see, is there a difference for example, between a treatment plan that was done 2 weeks ago versus 5 years ago? Yeah, of course. You need to be able to figure out, well, how old or stale are some of these treatment plans, and how do you find them? And again, if you're using paper, you just got to go through the charts one by one, which I think is just not a very effective system of doing that. Recalls. It's really about communicating with the patient, with our customers. But again, we want to be able to track, well, who's due for a pro fee and a checkup, who's got treatment plans on file, who's got pre-approved insurance, and how do we communicate with these patients to make sure they don't fall to the cracks. This is all part of what we do on a daily basis. So what are the solutions? And again, as I said, Maxident I think is a perfect example of a software company that does it. They've got these cute little names for it. And again, I'm not here to sell you on anything. As I said, I don't make a penny whether you decide to give them a call or not. I happen to be a fan of the company, a fan of the product. I know the people there. They started up in Canada, which is where I'm from originally. They've been down in the States for a number of years now. So for treatment plans, for example, they call it their Never Lose a Treatment Plan system. What it's doing is capturing those treatment plans into the charts. You can instantly find patients with current treatment plans. They use what's called an age treatment plan report. Makes it really easy to figure out who's got treatment that needs to be done, how old are those treatment plans. Makes it really easy to find that unscheduled treatment plan, and of course then be able to put it into, change those uncompleted treatment plans into production. That's critical. Same thing with insurance. Well, we don't want to lose treatment plans. We don't want to lose insurance as well. You should be able to capture this insurance approvals into the practice management software, then be able to coordinate your treatment plans, especially with those people that have already been approved, recall patients with insurance approvals, but without scheduled appointments. That's a great source of revenue. All these people who are on recall, they certainly have the benefits, but they fall into the cracks. We really want to be able to convert a lot of these pre-approved insurance patients into production as well. What about retention? I mean, it's great to bring new patients in, but if you're losing them out the back door, it's almost like a sieve. That's really not doing you a whole lot of good. And again, with a sophisticated recall system, Maxident calls it their Never Lose a Patient system, you can do that. You can track patients who have an appointment, but even more critically, what about all the active patients you have in your database who don't have recall appointments? I mean, there really are very few patients that I can think of in a general dentist practice that should not be on some type of recall system. But there's just so many that have fallen through the cracks. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just quickly, with a touch of a button, be able to say, okay, who are my active patients that haven't had a recall or don't have a recall scheduled? Makes it really easy to get them into the door at that point. Now, when you have that information, you can fill those chairs up weeks, months in advance, and try to get rid of the empty chair concept that so many of us are struggling with even in this day and age. Because with a good software program, as I said, now you've got the tools to find who those patients are and fill those slots. What about never losing the income stream? So that's basically what we're talking about here. This is, going back to that first slide that I showed you. You're converting all your treatment plans into production. You're tracking all those insurance approvals, and you're keeping on top of your hygiene system. Really, to me, this is the essence. This is where, as I said, I think a lot of people are not using their software. Some of you may have programs that can do some of the things that Maxident can do. I'm not saying that they're the only system out there that can do this. But the concept I'm trying to get across is that your practice management software really should not be a bookkeeping software. It should be a way of generating production and revenues for the practice. And a few other things that I think are somewhat unique to Maxident, things I like about their program, is that it's really a series of modules. And you can decide, how many of the modules you want to get at first. You can figure out what's going to make sense for your practice. Do you want to do everything right off the bat? Do you want to add things in stages, which we always recommend. If you're looking at a new practice management software, trying to do everything on day one really isn't a great idea. But really, it's a comprehensive suite of programs that handles everything from the reception to operatory, claims, billing, payments, all that types of stuff. A few things, as I said, are somewhat unique. It works on pretty much every operating system out there. It works with terminal services, works with XP. Certainly, that we may want to change that slide in a few months. Many of you may be aware of the fact that Microsoft has ended all support and patches for XP as of April 8th of this year. Most every HIPAA expert that I've talked to seems to feel that at that point your systems would not be considered HIPAA compliant. The only organization that I don't believe actually feels that way is the California Dental Association. I'm not really sure why they feel that way, but as I said, pretty much you go online and do a Google search for XP and HIPAA, and pretty much every site you're going to go to, everyone's advocating the same thing, that it's not secure, there's not going to be any security patches at that point, so it's time for a change. But, you know, you can use Windows 7, Windows 8, Linux, Mac using Boot Camp, 32-bit, 64-bit, doesn't make a difference. You can throw whatever you want at it. Another nice thing about this program is that not only will it work in a traditional single solo practitioner setup, but it also works with what's called a wide area network, a WAN. Normally when you're using a WAN environment where you've got multiple locations, satellite practices, you've got to go to some enterprise level software, you know, Dentrix Enterprise, for example, which is tens of thousands of dollars, and that's not going to be the case with a program like this. So a really nice feature with their software is that it will work over multiple locations very easily. All the data is centralized, doesn't make a difference where you are, you have access to it. Certainly, you know, it's got the standard things that you would look for in most of your practice management programs, but, you know, you want to be able to define user access. That's certainly really critical for HIPAA, security and privacy, audit trails, completely customizable screens and reports. I think that's a great feature to look for in your software. Instant messaging. I mean, so many offices that I go into are using non-secure messaging systems. They're using Skype or AOL Messenger or Yahoo Messenger, and from a HIPAA standpoint, those are absolutely not okay. You know, a built-in instant messaging software into the practice management software that's secure would be a much better choice. Reminder systems, you know, that are designed for individual employees, procedure code validation systems, all kinds of built-in managers for recalls and treatment plans and financial and images. You want to be able to scan directly into, you know, sometimes people are using these scanners that you have to create a PDF first and then you copy and paste that into the practice management software, which is, in my mind, basically double the work. You really should be scanning right into the program if you can do that. The other nice thing with their software is that you can use any imaging software. We have Maxident users that are using XDR and Aptrix and Dexis and Carestream, and it works with all of them. So that's a nice feature to look for. Where I have found a lot of practice management programs run a little bit short, especially when it comes to you know, things like having multiple practitioners in the practice. You want to be able to drill down and post payments and adjustments of, you know, per provider. You know, produce and report per provider and per procedure, even when you have partial payments, which I think is really tough for a lot of softwares to handle. You know, you need to know how much to pay an associate, and certainly that's something the software can do. I mean, really, if you think about it, this really is a game changer. I mean, it's really changing the way that we're looking at software and what we expect of our software programs to do. Charting, you know, it shouldn't just be something that you just automatically just, you know, put stuff on a chart. I mean, it's got to be smart. It needs to be able to anticipate your moves, to make it easier for you, learn the dentistry that you're doing, learn the correct procedure codes, you know, be able to capture that treatment, get it at the front of office so that they know specifically what the treatment plans are, get it, you know, for claim submission, payment, all that stuff should be an automated system. Another nice thing with their software is that more and more people are starting to ask me about using tablets and touchscreens in the operatory, and we're getting there. Certainly with the iPad, we have some limitations just because of the closed Apple operating system, but as the Windows 8 tablets are becoming more sleek and you know, certainly they give you a little more functionality because they're running Windows, I think that really is becoming an option for a lot of practices right now. Voice dictation, you know, very few practice management software programs can do voice. Certainly that's one thing that Maxident has done as well. And this is just some of the, you know, the typical slide of the charting, and again, you can customize this really to your heart's content. The perio charting as well, I think, is really good. As a former practicing periodontist, I'm usually very critical of how general dentistry programs handle perio. But You can do everything pretty much hands-free, whether it's voice dictation, using the dental wrap. The dental wrap, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's like a large foot pedal that you can use to enter charting. So that will work with this as well. And as I said, it's completely customizable, which is really nice because a lot of times you just don't like the colors or the layout or the fonts or whatever. You can change that any way you want. They'll set it up for you. So that's a nice feature as well. What about looking for digital images, for example? The software that they use, I think it's built by a company called Aptrix, which many of you may be familiar with, and it's been modified to work with their software. One of the claims to fame of this software, the Maxi Viewer, is it's going to work pretty much with every sensor out there. The only one that I'm aware of that may be an issue, I'm not sure if Maxident works with not, is DEXIS. I know that the core Aptrix program doesn't work with DEXIS, so I'm not sure if they do either. Certainly you can use the DEXIS software with the Maxident program, but the image software will pretty much work with every other sensor, phosphor plate system, intraoral camera, digital pan, have all that stuff working together. That's really critical because if you're looking at changing your practice management software, usually the last thing you want to have to worry about is now I got to change my image management software as well. I want to be able to get everything to bridge together. But if I have to make a change, why not use something that's built in with the Maxident software so that I can mix and match all of my sensors and cameras and phosphor plate systems, have them all working together, and you can do that. And again, this is just the typical slides showing the integration. As I said, some of you who have used Aptrix before, a lot of this looks somewhat familiar, but it's actually built into the software. They changed the name, and it's directly integrated right into their software. What about the appointment reminder system? As I said, there certainly are a number of decent third-party programs out there like DemandForce, but wouldn't it be great if it was already built into the software and you can send personalized reminders to your patients and remind them of appointments and planned treatments and pre-medications, things like that, and you can send it through email or text messaging. That's built into the software. You're not going to, with systems like this, you're not going to lose track of a patient's treatment. You're going to find those, checkups and planned treatments that haven't been filled yet. You can send these recall reminders automatically to patients to make sure they show up. A high risk would be someone who you sent a reminder to but hasn't confirmed it. Hey, this is a person who's a high risk for no-show. I think that's a person I'm going to actually get on the phone and call, or we're going to make sure that they understand that they've got this appointment coming up. So that's a good sign. Always surprises me that with the way that we're moving towards chartless and paperless environment, why don't most practice management software programs work with signature pads? There's a lot of programs out there that will not work with the signature pad. That's nuts. I mean, that's basic. How are you going to get all those forms signed? Informed consent and medical history forms, dental history forms, HIPAA forms. All that stuff needs to be signed. You don't want to be messing around with third-party programs for something like that. Just have it built right into the software. Another feature, why aren't more practice management software programs doing this? Your practice management data is the lifeblood of your entire practice. You lose that and you are dead. I mean, I got statistics that I've done with some of the lectures and webinars I've done in the past with people that have had loss of data. And with something, if you're down for like 10 days or you lose your data, you have a 93% chance of going bankrupt within 12 months. I mean, the odds aren't good. Why don't more practice management software programs have backup built into the software? Now, certainly for most of you, you're probably going to need something additional because you're not talking just practice management software. You've got images, you've got Invisalign data and QuickBooks, and you've got a server that you want to be able to restore from. We call that disaster recovery or business continuity. So those are different concepts. But if you think of the practice management software as being so critical, wouldn't it be nice if the software actually has an online backup service that is built right into the software, that it's encrypted so that it meets all the HIPAA requirements, it backs up your data, you can see a list of all those files, it's automated, you get confirmations. If there's a problem, you get notified of that, and they're going to fix it for you. I mean, this is a great feature, but there's very few practice management software programs doing that. So, really, I'm just trying to summarize here. The goal is to take your practice, make it a high-income practice. using systems like their Never Lose an Income Stream management system, which is the Never Lose a Treatment Plan system, the Never Lose an Insurance Approval system, and the Never Lose a Patient Recall and Appointment system. This is really a game changer, which is what we're talking about here. Your goal is to use this, your software program, get an easy, low-cost, high-income practice, produce and maintain a steady increase in income. I think that's really a big thing for a lot of practitioners. I certainly can tell you in my business, we are swamped usually in November and December because of all the people that are trying to take advantage of Schedule 179 deductions, and the bottom drops out in January and early February, and then we get busy again, and then it drops out in the summer, and it's aggravating, and it's frustrating, and it's terrifying when you see your production flying all over the place. And I know for people that are practicing, that's the same deal. You want to have like a nice steady increase and a steady source of revenues coming in, which you can get by using your software properly. Coordinate, manage your practice, get rid of a lot of those worries. And just, you want to be worried about doing dentistry. If everything else is running properly in the background and the software is doing what it's supposed to do, you're not sitting there losing sleep over it. You're doing what we were trained to do, which is to do clinical dentistry. If you are interested in looking at Maxident, and again, as I said, I'm not here to sell you on anything, just call them up. I think I have information at the end there. It's Maxident. You can call them up. When you log out tonight, if you're interested in getting the demo, there's no obligation. I know the people there. This is not one of those hard sell, we're going to have you on the phone for 3 hours and all this stuff. See what the software can do. Compare that to what you've got with your software. Let them know, here's what I'm looking for, here's where I'm at. They can put together a plan for you. You can get you trained properly on the system. And it really is, it's about developing processes and systems. It's not just about buying software and using it. You really want to have these protocols and systems in place. If you have existing practice management software, that's great. I think this is critical that if you're looking at any practice management software, they should be willing to do a free test conversion for you. Maxident for sure will do that for you, and that way you know going in. Now, in some cases, it may turn out that converting is not the right thing for you. It's the old concept of garbage in and garbage out, that if you've got messed up data in your existing program, when you do a conversion, not only is it going to be messed up, it'll probably be worse. So in a lot of cases, it may make sense to keep your old program running as patients come in. You manually put them into the Maxident. Yeah, it's a pain in the rear, and it's going to take you 9, 12 months to get people into the system. But once they're in, they're in. It's clean data. Again, it's not the ideal scenario, but at least by doing that test conversion, you'll know going in whether it's going to make sense to do that or not. Maybe you've got an existing system that you just recently bought, or not so recently, but it's worth something, and you want to try to see if you can get some value for that. And certainly they're willing to have that conversation with you as well. As I said, you can get everything if you want, but I like the modular approach. Get the things that you just need at first, get comfortable with it, get trained on it. At that point, start adding the other modules. You can grow in stages. You pay for the things that you just want right now, and then when you're ready, you use it. And you get the other packages. That's great. Another nice thing is you can try it, play with it, get trained on it, do everything you want. If you decide after a couple months, you know what, I've tried it, it's just not for me, then they're going to give you your money back. I don't know anyone. I assume this is the case. We've never had any of our clients who have gotten the software that have ever not continued to use it. So I know the company. I think they're an ethical company. I'm sure they stand by that. But as I said, it's extremely rare that someone would make this type of investment in time and energy and go through the process and then decide after a couple months, well, gee, it's not really what I thought it was going to be. So as I said, there's no harm in calling up, asking for the demo. The other thing as well is if you mention that you were on the webinar tonight, just mention my name. They're going to discount that. I'm not sure exactly how much they're offering, but certainly it's going to be more than what you get if you just call them up out of the blue. And that's pretty much all I really wanted to talk about. Let's see if we have any questions at this point. As I said, I do apologize that my voice has been cracking a little bit here. That's what strep throat will do for you. That's basically all I want to get across here tonight, folks. And as I said, I would highly recommend that if you are in the market for software, when you log out tonight, just indicate that you're interested in getting the demo. We have a question here about how frequent the updates are. I really don't. I don't know. We've got people from Maxident that are kind of listening in. I'm not sure one of them can send me a chat, but most practice management software programs will update themselves around 1 to 2 times a year. It depends on the software. It just, yeah, and I just got a chat from them that 1 to 2 times a year is what they do as well. And you know, I think it's a decent concept. You don't want to throw so many updates at an office that they're going to be left behind. A lot of times people are scared to do the updates because they're worried that they're going to mess up their system, or they're going to have to get everyone out of the software and close it down, and have to deal with all kinds of issues. So I think 1 or 2 a year is probably fine. As far as how accurate the dental rats are, or is voice better, my experience has been that any mechanical system, especially one like Florida Probe and the dental rat, I think the accuracy is pretty high. With systems like voice, I think the one that Maxident has is pretty darn good. I think you're always going to find that depending on the person's voice, their accent or whatever, you don't get the same level of accuracy as you would get with a foot pedal or with using a mouse, for example. I think it's accurate enough for most people, but again, if some people have a thick accent, or maybe you got a cold that day. So the other nice thing with to get back to that question about the updates is that, as I mentioned, it's a modular program. So a lot of times what they're doing is they're just upgrading and updating the module. So what's nice with that is that you don't have to necessarily close down the entire practice in order to update 10, 20 computers, because you're just updating that one specific module. For those of you who, we got a question here about if you want to watch the webinar again. Everyone on the webinar tonight will be sent a link probably by tomorrow that will have the entire recording of this webinar, and you can view it at your leisure. I also put every webinar that I do on my website, which is at thedigital.dentist.com. On the top bar there's a little thing that says webinars, and usually that takes me an extra day or two, but either one of those you'll have plenty of resources for that. That's basically it, folks. I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. Hopefully you got something out of it. As I said, if you want to talk more general IT and HIPAA and your backup strategies, etc., just indicate when you log out that you would like my office to follow up with you. If you are interested in getting the demo of Maxident, just indicate that as well. Cheryl from Maxident, who's a very good friend of mine, will be more than happy to make sure that she and her team follow up with you. And as I said, I think the goal here was to get some good concepts across to you. Hopefully we did that. Hopefully you learn about a software program that you may not have heard a lot about before. They don't have the marketing budget of a Shine or a Kerrigan or Patterson, but then again, neither does XDR or Aptrix, and they're great products and great companies. So we know your time is valuable. I thank all of you for joining us this evening. Many of you know that I do these webinars on a regular basis. I'm out of town for the next couple of days. I'll be up in Maine giving a lecture to the Casco Bay Dental Society. We've got a webinar on next Tuesday on extractions and bone grafting. Most of you who are on my list have already been sent an invitation, and we'll see you all on future webinars. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and have a good evening. Good night, all.